What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Live podcast. I am here in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama, and we interview the very best real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders all throughout the country. Today, I'm very excited to have a team together who has an incredible podcast out. I've got my friend Ray Gonzalez and his wife, Christy Risco, on the show. How are you guys doing today?
Great. How are you?
That's fun.
Very good. I think that it is every once in a while we want to kind of branch out and talk about subjects that kind of go beyond real estate investing, go beyond business and entrepreneurship, but it's the stuff that goes beyond that really ends up being like the glue that holds everything else together. And so that's why I think it's important to talk about this stuff every once in a while. So before I kind of dig into kind of the stuff that I want to talk about, I really want, Ray and Christy, you guys just to tell everybody who you are and what you do, and tell everybody about your podcast that you just launched here recently.
All right. So I'm Christy and this is Ray, and we are based out of Miami, Florida. We've been in the real estate investing field for 14 years, him about 8 years. I joined Forces. I was a teacher prior to that, a fourth grade teacher. So it was a big jump for me to get into real estate and entrepreneurship. So we just have learned a whole lot about obviously working together, about real estate, about business, about now parenting. We have a 3-year-old daughter as well. So always on our toes, and we're just really excited to share what we've learned so far. And it's just been a great journey, lots of ups and lots of downs, and everything in between. So we're really excited to share whatever we can to help others achieve their goals and their dreams.
So tell everybody about I've got tons of questions.
Sure.
But tell everybody also just about the podcast that you guys recently launched. So obviously you've been doing real estate, been successful business entrepreneurs for a long time, and decided to launch a podcast. What is it and why did you decide to launch it?
So, the podcast is both on board, and we, as we were like brainstorming names, what we wanted to do is show others that you could do it together, right? That you can co-create the life and business of your dream. That didn't have to be separate, because at the end, us, especially the males, we're mostly doing it for them, right? For our family, for everything else. Well, why not do it with them, and why not bring them on? Why not enroll them? Because what happens a lot of times is people grow apart in relationships, and it's because the other person doesn't have to be in the day-to-day of the business, but they do have to be enrolled. They have to understand, hey, if Brian's going to go out late and work late or host an REI live meeting or an investing, they have to understand who's filling in what and what the bigger purpose is. Like, why are we going to make these sacrifices, right, in the short term for a long? What are we doing this for? What's the impact here, right? So, and then again, once you get that enrollment and then you figure out how to make it work together, like now, one of the best blessings in my life, Brian, has been like, we don't have spending troubles in terms of like, I remember like I see a lot of my friends and their buddies like, where one person makes some money and the other person is more of the spender, where our values in that arena are aligned because we've built it together. So she has an open checkbook for personal development. I have an open checkbook for giving. She has an open checkbook for coaching. So travel, we have to travel a certain way. This is just the way, but again, we built up this together. So we built that muscle together. And it's just, things are smooth now. Like I don't ever question her doing like, so what I find at times is like that there's that separation of where one person's earning it and the other person kind of stays at home and is just a mom, which is not an understatement. But there's that separation because they didn't earn it together and they don't value it together.
Yeah, so I think that what you're talking about is so important because it doesn't get talked about, especially not in the circles I'm in anyway. It's typically the man, not always, but typically it's the man who's the real estate investor and he's out there and hopefully he's crushing it and comes home and I've heard, this is episode 132. I've interviewed a lot of people and I hear the same kinds of stories about the man has, just thought he's giving his wife everything that she could ever want, provided everything for her, but the marriage is in trouble. Like it's not what she wanted. She wanted him and he's spending all these hours. At one point, I wore it as a badge. You know, I'm working 100 hours a week. I wore that as a badge of honor. I'm doing that for her. But that's not necessarily a good thing always if obviously both aren't on board for that particular thing. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about these tough issues that just don't get talked about. And let's just start right there, what you were talking about, which is communication. Just how can we both be on board? Does it start and end right there with communication?
I think, well, I'm currently writing a book on the same subject. I'm about halfway through, and when we're organizing the chapters and thinking about what to talk about on the podcast, there's communication, and also I think maybe right above that or in unison with that is the individual, the personal development, the awareness that you bring to the relationship, to the communication. And I think that for us was one of the biggest game changers, was when we started to take responsibility for how we were showing up to the relationship before then communicating and getting together and discussing it, right? So I know that I have certain weaknesses, certain strengths. Then I know he knows, obviously, his weaknesses and his strengths. And then when we come to the communication, we come to the relationship together, then we're speaking from a very different place. So everybody talks about communication, but it's also how you're showing up. So obviously there's listening and speaking, and then there's also that dynamic of how you're communicating, right? How are you actually, where are you coming from? If I'm coming to him saying, oh, I'm not happy to give the example because you're spending, too many hours in the office and you're not paying attention to me, or we haven't gone on a date night, that's a very defensive and very confrontational tone, right? So versus me coming to him and saying, hey, how was your day? How's it going? You know what? I've been thinking a lot and we haven't gone on a date night in a long time, right? So right there, I'm taking ownership of what's happening, right? And seeing that the way he's going to receive it may or may not be the way I want him to receive it, but at least I'm coming from a very different place. So I think for us, that personal development, that really getting to know ourselves, getting to know each other at a very, deep level, obviously spending a lot of time together, working and living together, but just that extra step that you have to take before you start to communicate and how you're showing up.
Christy, and I know you kind of did, but talk a little bit more about that, because I haven't really heard it said that way before. What are some specific things that we actually can do to prepare ourselves to communicate? Like you said, work on yourself and work on personal stuff. What can we actually do?
So obviously there's going to be moments, like we all have bad days. We all have bad moments. We fight. We're not perfect, right? That's one of the things that we want to make very clear. We don't have it all figured out, but after, all these years of working and living together, the biggest thing that I've seen is when there is something that's bothering me, I don't go to him right away. And I think vice versa. Like when there is something that needs to be spoken about, that needs to be discussed, that needs to be figured out, I don't go right away to him. I first come into my, awareness of like, where am I coming from? What is it that's really bothering me? Because sometimes we all do this. We snap at one thing, but really I'm not mad at that specific. I'm mad at me. Right. I'm not mad at that specific thing. I'm mad at something that happened 5 days ago and I'm still holding on to it. I didn't even realize it. Right. So that awareness that comes in, where is that coming from? Where is that, that energy coming from? What is it that's really triggering me or bothering me or whatever?
Well, that's a great question right there, maybe people to ask themselves, like before you go and communicate, what in me is being triggered, right? Because usually what happens is it's something in us. It's we're not clear on me. So for example, I know what my issues are. Like Brian, like you have certain issues that pop up you have to be an idiot to be married this long and not know, look, for me being present. All right, cool. What can I do to be present? Baby, can you help me here? Because it's something that I want to get better at. I see the importance that I'm committed to it. It's just like, I'm just not doing it at times, right? So, but I think one of the things when we have a breakdown in communication, what usually happens is that something is being triggered. Hey, she said something to me about me controlling issues. And then that brought up a moment with my mom years ago and she wanted to control me. And now I'm bringing, and now instead of responding to her, I'm reacting. And I'm reacting to something that it's my own internal crap. So I think what in me is being triggered. and then from a place to see. But the thing is, you got to be vulnerable to communicate that, hey, babe, what really happened there is this and this and this was a trigger for me. So now you create awareness. But most of us live a life where we're not really aware of what's going on and what's triggering us. So we kind of react all day. You know what I mean?
Totally. I feel like this is like psychology session 101 right here. But talk about this, because Christy, you mentioned it too. You mentioned that word awareness. And it's just like, I feel like what I hear you guys saying is there needs to be some sort of self-discovery first before we ever, because we try to communicate with anyone else. It could be our spouse, but it could be anyone else, that it may not come out the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think one is self-discovery, and two is like when it's a relationship with your partner that you're most close with. I think defining and getting clarity before you get the communication, getting clarity on what are we about, babe? Like, what are we about? Like, what is this? Okay, cool. I'm good by myself, and you're great by yourself. Like, right? But what are we about together? Well, we're about growth. We're about personal development, and that's where we're going to live our life, right? So, Brian, I know that you're very into religion and your core beliefs here, right? Well, if your wife is in alignment with those, that's going to be trouble. Challenge is most people get together. They don't define what is the purpose of the relationship. So I'm here to help her grow. She's here to help me grow, and then we grow together. Right, but first of all, we're growing individually, and then we grow together. And like iron sharpening iron, right? So you're familiar with that, right? So that's what we're about.
So I think the obvious question that some people are probably thinking right now is, what if my spouse is not on board with my core values, or they don't align when we actually start going through some? By the way, in the podcast, it's almost like every episode that I've heard from you guys so far, there's tangible, hey, go to the website and download this and go do this exercise and do this exercise. And we're doing some of these exercises and we find out that some things that we have and believe in are not aligned. What are some steps that we can take? But we still love this person. We still want to be with this person. How can we get those things aligned?
That's a juicy one. I think for us, and again, this is from what we've learned from experience, what we've learned from having, business together, from having employees, is just really that accountability and that responsibility that you take for yourself, right? So people ask us that all the time, like, oh, how do I get you're not going to get them to do anything. Like, that's not the purpose of this. Like, you can't make someone do. You can't even make your kid. You can't make your kids do anything.
You can't make yourself do that.
Yeah,
you can
barely control yourself. So how are you going to control someone else, right? And for us, I think that was the going back to, it's just our favorite subject, but personal development was, once I got to understand myself at a deeper level, then I could show up from a very different place. And that's the thing that most people don't want to do, right? And it's not that they're not in alignment or that they're just completely different than you or whatever. Like, it's more of how you're showing up. How are you showing up to the relationship? How are you showing up to the friendship? How are you showing up to your business transaction? Like, it's so much about you, not from a like selfish or anything way, but like, it's so much about how you come to the conversation that it almost doesn't matter what the other person's doing. It sounds strange, but I could explain that a little bit better. But it's, if I'm showing up in my true authentic self, and these are my core values, and this is my alignment, and this is what's important to me. And obviously it's not every day that I show up as my best self, right? We all have bad days. But if I'm showing up from that place, then he can say, oh, okay, cool, I'm on board with that. Right. Or, you know what, that's not my thing. So let's, I'm going to do it differently. Right? We've been together 11 years. 2 months ago, I started going to the gym for the first time. Like, I had never, I don't like gyms. I'm not a fan. He goes to the gym sometimes twice a day, 6 days a week. Like, that's his thing. I just decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to give the gym a try. And I'm loving it. But he could never tell me, come to the gym with me because, you're going to love it and it's going to be so good for you. And you'll see. And that's how we show up. And that's just one example. But that's how we show up to each other. But
the thing is, you define, and I love what she's saying. What she's saying is, most people, like, when they look at themselves, Brian, they're not really clear on who they are. Like, they're living somebody else's dream. Like, we're going after what somebody else wants, not what we really want. And we're living somebody else's life, not who we really are meant to live. So getting clarity on what you stand for as an individual, and not based on somebody else's, what they want, but what you want and what you want for you. And then the most ironic thing that the magic of God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, shows you is that your partner will have skills, unique abilities, things that you most like. The reason you attracted this person is because they are great at things that you suck at, and things that you came here to this universe to learn, which is why God, source, whatever you want to call it, aligned you with this person. The thing is, we're so in our way that we want to fight that, and then we want to change them. But the truth is, they're whole, complete, and perfect, as are you. There's nothing wrong with you, but you're here to grow together. And if you know, on our first episode was, how do you have your spouse be your number one personal development tool? Well, then you have to allow them to sharpen you, and you have to be open and vulnerable and saying, hey, look, here's an area where I need improvement on. I'm clear. You are better at this than I am. Help.
I think it's great stuff, guys. I think where a lot of us get kind of tripped up is it's on them. Like, I want them to change. I want them to be this person. And I want that. How can, or maybe, you know, I'm doing a lot of reading. How can I get them to read more? How can I get them? I'm sure, Christy, you probably heard in the last so many years, hey, why don't you come to the gym? Why don't you come to the gym? And you just kind of said, I wasn't hearing that. It wasn't something that he could say that was going to get you there. It was almost like something that you had to come to that own conclusion for yourself. But I think we get tripped up in trying to change someone else, or why won't they change, or why won't they do this? But it's in reality, what I hear you guys saying, it's just work on us and just focus on us.
All I could do, like, look, I'm bringing, like right now, I walk with my daughter every day or whatever, and I bring a water bottle with me every day. She sees me. I get up and I meditate in the morning. She sees me. And then as she sees me do it, Daddy's meditating. Oh, Daddy's going to the gym. Daddy's going to go to the park with the water. Daddy, forget the water, right? Or the weight vest. So she saw, from example, all this stuff. And in her past, she wasn't open to going to the gym. It wasn't even part of her identity. But now I wasn't forcing it upon her. I was just doing me. And all of a sudden, she's like, you know what? I like this. I feel better about myself. Yeah. Right? So you know, again, it's...
And obviously that's a simplistic example. Like, obviously going to the gym or not going to the gym is not life-changing. But when you were asking, I think the question was more like actual values, actual spending habits, right? That was a big one for us. Sure. Like, you think of two people coming to a relationship, two completely different backgrounds, completely different upbringings, completely different experiences, and now they're coming together to, for lack of a better, you know, example, share the same bank account with two completely different viewpoints on how that money should be spent. And that's where the big, you know, obviously the big things start to break down. And I think for us was, again, going back to that awareness of saying, okay, well, I'm reading this book and it's totally shifting my mindset on how I'm spending my money. Let me stop and take a look at how I'm actually spending my money. And the responsibility piece and the ownership piece is huge, because what you're saying is exactly what we're, you know, not looking to fight in the world, but like, that's what's the problem, is that you want to change the other person. And I'm never going to change him. Like, he's never going to change me. It's just, we know that, but we keep doing it for whatever reason.
The weird thing is, what you want to do is not change them. You want to love them and accept them for who they're being. And whatever they're being, there's a gift in it for you. So what we're looking to do is change the paradigm of how you're looking at your partner. Your partner shouldn't be something that you're looking to change and fix. Your partner is someone that's looking to grow with you, and that their unique things they're gifted at. Look, for example, she was very good at taking vacation and taking time off. I wasn't. I was the 100-hour guy. I was the guy who's worked hard, saved forever. But I wanted some of it, what she wanted of me. And what happens is, if we don't honor that, then we resent that in her, because we try and change her. And if you do succeed in changing her, you'll both be miserable, because you didn't attract that. You attracted her because your soul wanted a part of this. But we're so in each other's way that we don't allow that.
I think for me, listening to the podcast, and it's very new, you're just what, about 5 or 6, 7 episodes into it as of this recording. And guys, for me, it's to hear the woman's perspective in what is a man's business. You know what I'm saying? And to hear that the woman's perspective on some things that I know are totally true, that my wife should be like, she needs to know this stuff. So I played it. We were on a long road trip, and I started, hey, you mind if I play this podcast? The kids were asleep, and it was late. You mind if I play this? Yeah, sure, go ahead. And she's fiddling on her phone, and she's like, hey, she perks up. She's like, because there's a female voice that's kind of giving a voice to her feelings and her emotions that she was never able to. She didn't even know what she didn't know, kind of thing. And she was
being validated. She was being her feelings were being validated. Where you and I, we couldn't do that.
So I want you guys to talk about just that dynamic, between a typical kind of male attitude and then the typical maybe female attitude. I know we're making some assumptions and generalizations, but I think this is going to help a lot of people.
Well, I think it's obviously we talked about like getting to know yourself on an individual level, and also we have a lot of these problems that are problems, but we feel like they're specific. Like, no, but this is my problem. You don't have this problem. This is my problem. But in the end, and through personal development, we've obviously been through a lot of seminars and read a lot of books, but mostly human beings have the same 5 or 6, maybe 10 problems that they're not unique to anyone. Like there may be some specifics, right? There may be some certain things, but you figured it out this way, or you went through that experience, so that's why you feel this way. But they're the same problems, right? They end up being pretty much the same issues that all couples go through, right?
We just think we're unique, but we talked about this yesterday. We just think we're unique, but it's the same problems over and over again, just a little bit slight tweak, but you think that it's different, and you want to hold on to your problem, you want to pet your problem, you know what I mean?
And then when you kind of not oversimplify, but you just get to the basic, level. Like, I have certain needs and I have certain desires and I have certain wants and all that. And then so does he. And then once you get clear with those, then you can start to say, okay, well, this is how I feel about things. Like, I'm even doing, our podcast and putting out my book, and like, I'm a private person. I like to, it's like, I like to just kind of be in my own world, and I'm not really into social media and all that stuff. He can be, Facebook Lives all day long. So we know that about each other. And then that we can bring, okay, I'm going to do all the behind the scenes stuff because that's what I love and that's what I'm good at. And I'm going to get all the content together. Great, go sell it. Great, go put it out. Go. So you start to kind of come together
as a team
because I know what I'm good at and he knows what he's good at. And, obviously we love psychology as well, and like masculine and feminine energies, and you kind of start, when you start going down that rabbit hole of personal development, things just start clicking and making sense, and we start to see that we're really not all that different as humans, right? And then between the male and the female energies, then you come together and you say, okay, well, this is a very feminine energy, the going with the flow, the letting things happen, the being, compassion. Like, those are feminine energies, and not that men don't have those energies as well, but then he's more the, let's go, let's got it, let's fix it, let's get it done, let's, make it happen. And so when we come together, like, once we understood how we work on an individual level, then we come together, then it's like, it's magic, it's exponential, right? So I feel like that's kind of why we wanted to do this both on board thing. And even when we think about doing retreats or doing seminars where it's, couples in the room together, like you said at the beginning, like, relationships and finances are probably the two most difficult things to talk about, the most taboo subjects. Nobody wants to talk about it. No one wants to, ask, oh, how's your balance sheet doing? Or how are you guys doing? Oh, we're fine. Like, everything's fine.
That's the most downloaded podcast, by the way, is that one, is the one on money. So we're going to start focusing more on that and how to have that communication, how to understand that. But I think one of the biggest things, to answer your thing, baby, you know what I mean? Like, so what you're saying is, like, just then valuing her. Like, so for example, let's look at that. When you said, Brian, there's different values, right? Yeah, there is, but that's the magic in it. See, people think, oh, our values are different. Dude, that's where the magic is, because now, like, the value of her using her throat to be a great speaker, she saw me doing that, but she's actually better at it. Like, I'm second fiddle on the podcast, no doubt, right? But now it's allowing her to really work that muscle. So the reason that she attracted me in her life is because she wanted more of that, but she wasn't allowing it in herself, right? And then, but what the challenge is, it's our reaction to that is we then shut down, or right, we make it wrong. But the truth is, like, that's her magic, and vice versa. Like, for example, when you said the feminine features, the spirituality, the compassion, the heart, I'm working more and more on those that are much more natural to her, because my life needs some of that. So what we're really looking for is integration and balance. And we come together to create that, and seek that in each other. So, like, I think that's where the magic is. the fact that your values, they're supposed to be similar, but they're not supposed to be the same, because you want that variety, you want that spice, you want that. That's what makes it fun. The thing is, we try and change each other, and then like you don't want two people of the same thing. That's no fun.
No doubt about it. Ray, I know I've spoken to you in the past about just legacy. We've talked about that a lot. And I really wanted to know, I mean, you kind of obviously touched on this a lot, why you started the podcast. But, when you start talking about that word legacy, obviously that probably had a lot to do with it. But what are the goals with this thing? Like, where do you see it going? You mentioned retreats potentially, couples types of things. Where do you see this going in the future?
Well, we're still in the talks with that. One of our big things is life by design. So designing your life how you want it, to be and to look, so that you can grow into that vision. And so we're looking our best, trying our best to stay true to that in as far as like what this is going to look like, right? So we'd love to do retreats, we'd love to do seminars, but we put on a few masterminds, and it's very time consuming. We have a 3-year-old, we have our business, our real estate business, obviously, that someone's got to keep up with. And so we're figuring that out. But I mean, and this is probably the first time I'll say it out loud, but like big vision is like, we want to just like eradicate divorce. Like, we don't want divorce to exist. Like, that's kind of like the big
or make it optional, right? where I think people are too quick to do it, right? Too quick to, because the truth is, no one wants to shine the light on themselves, right? It's because the weird thing, Brian, it's easy to shine the light somewhere else.
Totally.
It's much harder to shine the light inside, and then all the inner stuff you got to work, and then all the crap you learn from your parents, right or wrong, right? It's hard, and then come together and be open and vulnerable. It takes work, and I think in not our society, Brian, but in general, it's easier not to do that, right? It's no one wants to sit in silence and meditate and kind of, why is this coming up for me? What's going on here? Like, it's just it's work, and that's where the growth is, Brian.
Yeah, guys, I can't tell you how much I love the podcast. It's a total game changer specifically in this space, in the real estate investing space. I know you got the vision's bigger than that, but it's just a total game changer. When I first heard it, I was like, I was like, I feel like this is what my wife would say to me because she doesn't know, and she's scared, might be scared to say things to me. And just, it's great to hear. That's why you said you play Ray, you kind of play second fiddle a little bit, because Christy's voice is so important for someone like me and for the real estate investor that really needs to hear that. And I just want to publicly thank you for doing it and for coming on the show and providing us with a little bit of perspective.
And Brian, for me, like personally, it was hard to get my ego, because my ego was always the one who wanted to shine the light, right? And I said, look, it's not about me. But again, that took some self-reflection. Oh, me, right? Look, dude, this is about her. Let's get this going, right? So let's make impact. What's the mission, right? So again, it's just an ongoing process, man.
Before we go, my favorite story of the podcast I've listened to, I want you guys to retell the story. My favorite story is the story with the coconut butter. I want you to tell the story.
The almond butter.
Almond butter. Yeah, the almond butter.
Yeah. Martha, the almond butter brand name is Maranantha. I didn't know how to pronounce it. So I'm going, I just started to make some money, and we're still dating. She's still a teacher, and I go to get this peanut butter. And I just grab it, and I'm like, this is the one I want. It's all raw, it's organic. She looks at me, it's $20. Like, and of course we're at Whole Foods, right? And I go, babe, but it's delicious. And we get home, and sure enough, he was like, oh, well, that's glorious.
And what's the lesson? What's the lesson behind telling that story?
I think for us, it was just kind of like a funny way several things, but one is like, go after what you want, like get what you want. Like, a lot of us are playing such a small game. And I think that's why when we talk about coming together and having this magic, like, it's so much more powerful when it's the two of us together. Like, when he's not around and I'm doing stuff for myself, I'm like, man, I kind of miss him. Like, and not from a corny way, but from it's just so much better when we're together. And then when you do come together, like, there's so much more potential in both of us showing up. And I think for us, that was one of the things where it was just like, get what you want. Like, don't get the $12.99 one if that's not what you really want. Go out and make some more money and get the $20 one, or figure out how to make it happen, right?
And this happened between us recently. I mean, we just told you that one story, but now recently we just got back from a trip in Vegas where we gave to charity, and she went big, and I didn't go anywhere near as big. And then she goes, no, you need to do this right. And then now I paid the tax for not doing it right, and then she went right. So it's like look how far she's come, where she's like, her giving muscle is much better than mine. And the truth is, it wouldn't matter anyway. So I go, babe, let's give more. Like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's an awesome lesson.
Yeah. Being able to have those shared money values where what do you value in expensing and expenses? Well, we value giving, we value personal development, and we value experiences like traveling. We're going to travel in a nice, but I think as couples, we're not clear what we value. Do we value some nice material things? Yeah, but those aren't really high up on our list. The biggest things are experiences for us, personal development, any coaching, anything. And then the way we travel, like convenience is big for us. And being willing to pay more where we value it, right?
Right. Great lessons. I wanted to give everybody listening just a little snippet of what they can expect when they go to the Both on Board podcast. I'm sure you can get it downloaded on iTunes. You can download it on Stitcher and the Android app. And go to bothonboard.com and just Ray and Christy, give everybody listening just a little bit of a snippet of what they will get at the website. I know that you guys have like a lot of resources there too.
So yeah, we're in the middle of obviously building that out and putting those things together. We're building up the Facebook page as well, and on the actual website. If you go to the website, there's we put together a PDF called 7 Game Changers for the highly effective entrepreneurial couples. And just the kind of goes through step by step. Like obviously we talk a lot of high level here, but it gives you like step by step things of all the things that we've done. And like just wanted to share before we finish, just this has been like a long time in the making, and it's a muscle. Like for us, this is the muscle, and for everyone, it's a muscle. Like you build on it little by little. So just because you're not on board after day 2 of talking about this stuff, that's it gets easier, and it also it's a never-ending work.
And we still have some challenges here and there, but it's about getting back on track. Hey, getting back on board. Hey, I was off, you were off. Cool, let's get back on. And again, comparison is a depth of joy. Run your own race, keep getting better and better. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. Like we just recently had that time we were comparing us to somebody else. It's like, dude, we're running our own race. Like just let's focus on that, right? So don't compare yourself to anybody. Just keep getting better and better in the areas you want to get better at.
Awesome stuff. Both on Board is the name of the podcast. We're going to link it up in the show notes, link up the website. Guys, thank you so much for both. I got both of you on the show together. It was an absolute honor to speak to you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you, my man.
And guys, make sure you go and hit that subscribe button so you get the alerts. We got some incredible guests on the horizon. You don't want to miss those. We love you so much. We'll see you next time.